Hello friends, this is Darkscream and welcome back to Crafting for Dummies. This episode will cover a part of the crafting system I've really enjoyed, Shadowflame crafting. It's a little bit different than the normal crafting because you have to come here. We'll talk about that more in a minute. First, what the heck is Shadowflame crafting? Shadowflame crafting is not for the faint of heart. For today's discussion, it will be assumed you're a high-level crafter with a lot of profession knowledge. You'll also be working with expensive recipes, Shadowflame essences, and sometimes rank 3 materials, so you'll be putting up a lot of gold to get this done. However, the return will be just as hefty, which is very time efficient. Although, as the patch goes on, the price has started coming down recently, these things have become a lot more accessible. Since more people are getting into it, that helped me decide to make the video. Shadowflame Essence is a rare drop from the raid, Aberrus. It only comes off bosses, and it's occasionally dropping in every difficulty. As well, rarely off the world boss in suffusion camps. This rare item was quite expensive when it first came out, although the prices have come down. It's still pretty pricey. At time of recording, up around 7,000 gold in North America servers, and that's the price coming down. As you can see here, trended quite high before. The item itself is used in 4 different recipes: the Shadowed Alloy, the Shadowflame Wreath, the Shadow Tempered Armor Patch, and the Tinker Shadowflame Rockets. On top of that, there's several recipes that use the Shadowed Alloy: the Shadowed Impact Buckler, the Shadowed Raising Annihilator, the Shadowed Belt Clasp, which we'll talk about more in a minute, the Heat Resistant Rescue Ring, as well a piece of the Drakthir Evoker Legendary. It's one of the recipes someone on the Legendary quest can bestow upon a blacksmith. That recipe will use 20 of the Shadowed Alloy. All the different Shadowflame recipes must be crafted at the Shadowflame crafting tables, which can be found at wherever the Firak Assault is. He has several different locations he can be attacking in the Dragon Isles. Make sure to bring any materials and consumables you need before you go, because there will not be a mailbox anywhere nearby. Usually it's a questing hub town that's a little bit of a fly away. I also recommend having multiple tools for Shadowflame crafting. Depending on the prices in the market, you may find that inspiration, resourcefulness, or multicraft may be the most profitable tool to use, depending on the item and all that. Best bet is just let CraftSim make that decision for you, and make sure you bring your aerated file of quick hands, as well as your sagacious incense if you are going to be relying on inspiration. As well, any of the other minor crafting reagents, although I usually find those not to be very profitable at this point. As you approach the area where the invasion is active, you'll be able to see these plumes of smoke and shadow flame. Sure enough, there will be a number of enemies here. Now, as you explore this area, you will find the different crafting tables. They're in a set location for each invasion spot, but since the invasion spot changes every week, that means you're coming somewhere different every week. For example, you may have to clear out an enemy here, but here's the Shadowflame incantation table. Now, it's important to note that the events can still go on. The raid bosses can still fly above your head. There's Firak now, while you're crafting. One nice feature about the Shadowflame crafting tables is they do function as regular crafting tables as well, so you can fulfill regular work orders from here. If someone sends you an order that requires the Shadowflame table, you can do it here, but you can also complete regular work orders here, which is pretty cool. And so each week it'll take you a minute to fly around and find each crafting station. For example, here's the Shadowflame Forge if you were going to smelt some Shadowed Alloy. They can be found throughout the camps. You might have to fight a couple of enemies. One interesting thing to note is while you're here, occasionally you may encounter the raid boss. It's not exactly high-level gear or anything that will drop from this, but if you're here anyways, you can just tag him, help them kill it. I believe some gold comes out of the loot box as well. You get some lower-level crests and some flight stones, so not something you should go out of the way to try and get this raid boss, but if you're here crafting and the raid boss is up, it's really nice and convenient. Just tag it, spam some buttons, you know. Well, that's embarrassing. But let's get to the real reason you're all here. How do we use Shadowflame to transmute our artisan's metal into gold? Let's review the recipes, requirements, and opportunities. Starting with Enchanting, Shadowflame Wreath. The formula for Shadowflame Wreath can be found as a drop off the raid boss Magmarax on all difficulties, or it can be purchased off the auction house for a hefty sum of gold. Once you've got the recipe, you're not quite done. The materials are pretty expensive. It has a high skill requirement and no materials with quality to get a bonus from. As you can see, even adding the illustrious insight would still leave us short of the guaranteed maximum rank breakpoint. And you can see here, CraftSim doesn't have the full specialization info, so I can show you. You're going to need weapon enchants all the way up to fire enchants for this one. You'll need that just to put the illustrious insight in. You will also need all the little passive bonuses you'll find in the disenchanting tree here. Most notable is the elemental shatter, which you will need to shatter an awakened fire in order to get that bonus to your skill. Crafting weapon enchants requires a lot of knowledge. Sorry. And just to show how it works, you can see here, I would need the inspiration in order to reach max rank with the Shadowflame Wreath. Even if I add the illustrious insight, it doesn't increase my number enough. However, if I go ahead and I go to Elemental Shatter, I'm going to go ahead and waste an awakened fire for you here. I'll go ahead and break that. You'll see I get this buff that says, Enchanting skill when crafting with fire essences increased by 25. Well, when we go back, those are certainly fire essences. That gives me a little extra skill on that bar. Now when I add my illustrious insight, it will automatically be max rank. You can see here that makes it much more profitable to craft this item. Now for the Shadowflame Wreath enchant, it's important to note not only do you need to create it at the Shadowflame incantation table, but if you've tried to use the enchant, you may know you can also only apply it at the Shadowflame incantation table. So if you're helping a customer out or a friend, making them the enchant, you may want to remind them that yes, they'll have to fly all the way out here to put it on their weapon. This enchant was my most profitable item at first, but it was soon overtaken by the next one we're going to talk about. Let's discuss Leatherworking's Shadowflame Tempered Armor Patch. The pattern for Shadowflame Tempered Armor Patch drops off Neltharion on all difficulties, or it can be purchased off the auction house for a good chunk of gold. Now, as it turns out, this ended up being the best in slot embellishment on single target for many different classes, making it a hot ticket item on the auction house. Unlike the Shadowflame Wreath enchant, this recipe does have materials with quality, so you can check the profitability of rolling cheap materials with inspiration, but I prefer to guarantee max rank using artisan's metal, and that requires rank 3 materials, so that's what we'll discuss today. If you have a keen eye, you may have noticed it only uses the lesser illustrious insight, which means it can be very profitable to craft. You get 5 lesser insights breaking down the normal one, so they're worth 10 artisan's metal rather than 50. Before you start crafting, make sure you have the correct tool equipped. I have one made with multicraft and the resourcefulness enchant just to min-max this recipe specifically. It has quite a dramatic effect on the margins. Another thing you can do to improve your margins is check if crafting your own Earthshine scales at rank 3 would be profitable compared to just buying them. Keep in mind at that point you're going to have to resell some rank 2s that you don't want, but sometimes if you've got the right tools and the right spec, it can be profitable. It does take knowledge outside the scope of Shadowflame crafting though, so keep that in mind. As for the knowledge requirements on the Shadowflame armor patch, it's not nearly as intimidating as what we've been looking at before, coming in at around 115 points, and really only 25 of the points are out of the way. The other 90 would be taken by pretty much every other leatherworking spec. And once again, you'll be coming to the Suffusion Camp to do your crafting. You'll be looking for the Shadowflame Leatherworking crafting table. This is what it looks like here. However, you don't need to attach it here, you only need to craft it here. You don't have to come back, which is worth celebrating. And as I've mentioned in previous videos, if you're doing this, they sell pretty fast, and you'll blow through your artisan's metal. So if you have run out of artisan's metal, you may want to check out my video about the artisan's curios on Forbidden Reach. Hey, we're about halfway through the video. How about you recraft that like button for me, and I'll give you some more good tips. Next up, we have a quicker one to cover from engineering. It's the Tinker Shadowflame Rockets. The schematic for Tinker Shadowflame Rockets drops off Ziskarn on all difficulties, and unlike previous recipes, you can buy this one super cheap since it's not very popular. This Tinker is unfortunately a stinker. It requires an insane amount of knowledge that I don't even have in order to be maxed out. But even if you can do it, as you can see, there's very little demand for this effect in the high-end scene. It's not profitable even to craft this with rank 3 materials and artisan's metal. Maybe there's some margins you could find by crafting all the individual engineering pieces, but overall, this just hasn't looked profitable for me. However, eventually it could become more relevant, and it's one of our 4 Shadowflame recipes, so it's included. Who knows, maybe you'll prove me wrong and turn a huge profit with this someday. Let me know in the comments if you have. If you did want to craft this Tinker Shadowflame Rockets, you're sharing your crafting station with the Blacksmith, so you're going to come to the Suffusion Camp and find the Shadowflame Blacksmithing Anvil pictured here behind me. The good news is, if it does become popular, it only needs to be crafted here. You don't need to come here to attach it. Again, worth celebrating, I think. Tinker Shadowflame Rockets wasn't the most exciting recipe, but the next one has quite a bit more to it. We've got quite a lot to cover with Blacksmithing, Shadowed Alloy, and its uses. You will need the Suffusion Camp to do your Shadowflame Blacksmithing, but if you're just starting out, there's somewhere else you gotta go first. The real villain of patch 10.1. It's Ponzo. So I'm going to assume that you're familiar with the Niffin reputation and the bartering system. Ponzo sells a bunch of items. You can see I've cleared most of them out. But the 2 we're going to talk about is the Ponzo's Cream and the Timeshare Voucher. Shadowed Alloy will take 1 Ponzo's Cream, which is 10 barter boulders or 20 barter bricks. As well, another lucrative pattern, the Shadowed Belt Buckle, will take you a Glimmerog Timeshare Voucher. And if you come visit the local blacksmith, Kiln Master Krubus, you will see that he's got 2 of the most important blacksmithing plans for you. And again, 1 Ponzo's Cream, that'll be 40 bricks or 20 boulders. 1 Glimmerog Timeshare Voucher, that'll be 80 bricks or 40 boulders. Once you've got your recipes, you're ready to head back to the Suffusion Camp and find the Shadowflame Forge. For a change of scenery, we're at a different Suffusion Camp. Doesn't matter which one, where it moves, they all have the crafting stations. Now, an interesting thing about the Shadowed Alloy, at least right now, it doesn't have too much of a price differential based on rank 2 or rank 3. You can see here down at the bottom, Craft Sim shows Inspiration is not a very profitable stat to use with this alloy. So good news, as long as you can pump out rank 2s, it's fine. And in fact, Multicraft and Resourcefulness will earn you a lot more gold. However, if you're doing that, I would recommend don't just craft 1, right? You really need to craft a bunch to get these average percentages to work out. So as you can see, it's reasonably profitable at 1,000 gold a craft, but if we take a look, going to rank 3 and adding an Illustrious Insight really doesn't add that much value, only about another 500 gold per craft, but it is only a lesser Illustrious Insight though, so at least it's less metal. Now you could just sell the Shadowed Alloy, or you could make something with it at the Shadowflame Blacksmithing Anvil. You'll have to come back here to make the Shadowed Belt Clasp, which you can sell on the auction house for a fair amount of gold. Or if someone places an order with you for one of these special items, the Shadowed Impact Buckler, or the Shadowed Raising Annihilator. Good news is, the heat-resistant rescue ring, although it does take Shadowed Alloy, it doesn't need a special anvil. Now, the Shadowed Belt Clasp, you can see, is actually decently profitable, even at the 2-star rank, and if we go ahead and sim it, pretty profitable, right? But, let's clear that. Not that much more profitable than just doing a plain 2-star. Now the prices for this will fluctuate a lot, but pretty much everyone needs a Shadowed Belt Clasp, and I know some folks who are tight on gold will settle for the rank 2 if it's a little cheaper. Currently Craft Sim says Multicraft is the more profitable way to go, but you should always do your scan before you roll it. One thing to note about the Shadowed Belt Clasp is that in order to attach the Illustrious Insight, you actually need to have armor smithing belts maxed out. So far, the most profitable part of Shadowflame Blacksmithing for me has just been selling the belt buckles. Both rank 2s and 3s sell pretty well, and your margins are even better if you're crafting your own alloys. With that, we've covered what you need to know to start Shadowflame crafting. If you make a bunch of gold, let me know in the comments. I hope you've enjoyed it, As always, like and subscribe for more, and we'll see you next time. Peace.